Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to everyone. We're going to get a little bit of traffic noise on this walk, but it's a walk that I really want to take you on this morning because of the sheer beauty of the environment here. See the ski hill? So I went up again yesterday. I don't think I'll hike up this morning. I've had a couple of days of just loads of exercise. But the reason I wanted to bring you all here this morning, we will have to deal with some noise from the traffic, but there's just a whole different perspective on this area. Have a little look at this, everyone. All right. So this is all wildlife preserve out here. In fact, right through the whole Yellowstone, that's great. The whole Yellowstone environmental zone, it's about 93% totally protected. And down here in this part of Wyoming, it's about 97%. So I am on the main road in and out of Jackson. But I really wanted to come up here to give these perspectives. This is the Jackson Hole Valley, ladies and gentlemen. That must have been a band right there, I expect. So there's this gorgeous hill over here. We are surrounded by so much incredible beauty. If you joined me the other day, up to the left, of course, are the mighty Tetons. We won't see them from here today, but we're down in the valley, and there is the National Elk Refuge. So there's tons of national forests, so many wildflowers. This has been the most spectacular tour of wildflowers that I think I've ever done down here, and I have done a lot of tours here. But here we are. So the town of Jackson with 10,000 people is wedged into a small area out here. About 20 minutes drive away is Teton Village. There are moose. There's moose up on the Snake. So we're in the valley of the Snake River. However, what happens, this whole marshland, thank goodness it's all protected because this is wonderful for so much waterfowl. The Snake goes around the other side of this mountain here, but it's only up to Moose Crossing, in fact. That's where we do a lot of the float trips. I often see moose, but what's been happening, so right now, it is about 49 degrees, something like that. It was 9 Celsius when I walked out, and now it's warmed up as the sun's coming out. Yesterday afternoon, we got up to 86. Remember, I'm walking along at 6,200 feet here, like way, way, way up. But have a look. So the greater Yellowstone region, and that's how we're in here. But we are wedged into geologically. You need to come and take a 10-day tour with me to really climb into the geology here. But it is just so incredible as an area. And because we've got the Wind Range over the Wind River Range, just the other side of these mountains, and that is the Continental Divide. So we are obviously on the west slope here. The Snake itself is the longest tributary of the mighty Columbia River, but you see so much down through here. One thing we're not seeing nearly as much of are antelope. Usually as I come down through the valley, we see them, but they caught a respiratory illness last year, so we're seeing a lot less. Now, I almost took my headphones out, but there's so many cars, I thought I'd leave them on just because the birds are just singing and dancing. Chloe, it is, the reflections are gorgeous. I just want to come up a little further. This path, by the way, goes right up on into Teton National Park. And of course, Jackson is one of the wealthiest communities, well, not just in the United States, in the world. And so needless to say, they have some pretty fabulous infrastructure as well. But this is just a good bit of advice. When thunder roars, go indoors, because they can get some pretty wicked storms here. I just wanted to come around here. I'm watching for bikes. See, those are all the float boats going out for fly fishing. They have different varieties of cutthroat. But just on the other side, there it is. Welcome to Jackson, Wyoming, incorporated 1914. Elevation 6,209, so that's about 2,000 meters. And there is Snow King Mountain up there. Now that's the small ski hill. Teton Village or Jackson Hole Resort is the big, world famous one. But this is actually bigger than it looks. And if you go back, if you didn't join me the other day, if you go back on Facebook, you can see the replay of the tour I did at the very top with just so many wildflowers all at the same time. So it's awfully fun. So they were doing a competition the other day, and I knew that when I was doing the tour. I said there was an event. I just didn't understand what the event was, but the event was called 29029. If anybody knows what that is, that's basically in feet the height of Mount Everest, and it went on for a day and a half, and people walked straight up basically 19 times which is the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest. So that's pretty impressive. And obviously, here, when I lived in Cusco, Peru, um, I was another 5,000 feet higher. So it's not that high, but it's a great place for training. It's a bit like Canmore, Alberta, where you kind of hit that target zone for sports training and altitude training. But these reflections are just so gorgeous, and the birds all dancing around. So the main preserve actually goes back up through there. So you don't tend to see a lot of elk right here. But of course, famously in Jackson, you have the big antler arches that have come off the elk. And the good news is no elk are harmed in the harvesting of the antlers. The elk right now we're in, mid to later July. And so it means that the elk are busy. The male elks are just eating, doing their very best to keep growing their antlers. They can grow up to 1 centimeter a day. So there's Signs Town Square, Snow King Recreation Area. But it is neat. They have a good historic society here. Of course, obviously everything to do with Jackson. By the way, this is all poop from all the geese that are down around here. So I'll watch my step. They were all just here, and they've just moved on somewhere else at the moment. But it plays up this very, of course, Western feel. And it is. The influence, of course, in terms of food, a lot of it's that kind of barbecue, that sort of thing. Yet last month, while I was here, this community embraced the Pride festivals. And it goes back to a certain degree. There's certainly that Western sense of independence. Yet remember, in 1920, the entire town council was women. And as I repeat so often, but it's so significant, that this was the first jurisdiction in the world where women achieved full suffrage. So I think that's pretty fantastic. There's some of the geese down there. This is the best way to view Canadian geese, with a fence between you and them. I'm surprised the Canadian Air Force has permission to land here, but there they are. And I knew there'd be some traffic noise, but I wanted to share this morning light. Like I say, in Celsius, it was 9 degrees when I was going out. See all these little berries in there, great for the birds. It's exactly what the bears go after. I was up doing a little work at 6 a.m. And when I get up really early here, I'm always tempted to go hike up the mountain again. But it's the one time I'd want to have bear spray with me early in the morning. There's all the tour coaches heading in and out. Although I have to say, more and more tour companies are actually staying out of town now because it's so hard to get hotel space. But let's just enjoy some of these reflections for a moment. So all of these rounded hills, I'm flying in a few hours. So I was up doing, I had a 6 a.m. call this morning, local time, and say it's just gone 8 o'clock local time, to put that in perspective. Mountain Standard Time, exact same time as Banff and home. I was just distracted there, but yes, the challenges now of staying down here is you have to find companies that manage to still get a room block here, because it's just become so expensive. It's just a concern. Like the hotel I'm staying in, I really like, nice lodge, but on weekends, $500 a night. There's so many different paths, interactive areas here. So there, by the way, you'll see moose. That's the bridge, and that's the mighty Snake River that's coming down. But these little mounds we see are from the last series. Well, we've had glaciations here for about 500,000 years. That's been a huge effect on the area. But of course, really what's happened is the rock up in the Tetons, some of the rock is 2.5 billion years old, yet it's the youngest range. And then down on the far side, the Wind River Range, rock's about 1 billion years old. That's the continental divide. And then, of course, mighty Yellowstone pops up 640,000 years ago. And when I say it pops up, as I try to explain so often when I do tours, Yellowstone doesn't move, the continent moves, and it's a hot spot on the planet. There is one other hot spot to the south. Look at all the birds right around here. These wetlands are fantastic, and lots of little bugs around. So lots for them to eat. There's a red-winged blackbird, and the other ones are just blackbirds, and they're hard to see. Right now it's just so gorgeous. But town starts. Now the huge challenge for towns like Jackson, a bit like Banff, but of course it's not protected land. It's not a national park, although we're surrounded by Teton National Park, which is just so beautiful, and of course, mighty Yellowstone. But they have a housing crisis here. They actually have a very integrated public transport system to move employees around. And when you do come for a visit to Jackson, you will meet people from around the world serving here and doing all the many administrative jobs. And a lot of them just have visas for just 4 months or 5 months. So, recently, the last few trips, I've met a lot of people from Turkey who've come over, and that's really fun. There's another one of those float boats. See, all of those boats going out, that's all for fly fishing. You go with the guide. The guide does not fish. The guide knows the area, and so she or he will paddle into the nice holes where you can fish. This is the 3% that's not protected, just as I come into the town area. Everything else around it is. But the town is an independent town. It's not in a national park like Banff is. It's just surrounded by it. And so that's why it can't grow. And so the average house price now, the last time I Googled it, the average house price in Jackson, Wyoming is $3.7 million. Now out in Teton Village, which is up by the Jackson Hole ski resort, which I've never skied and I would like to, but there's a house, someone told me the other day, a house is being built for $60 million. So remember, the IMF meets at Davos in Switzerland, and it meets here in Jackson Hole. So the airport's only 15 minutes, straight up here. Literally takes 15 minutes. My favorite airport in the entire United States. It's one level, lovely, friendly, and you take off looking at the Tetons. And also, I've already had a message this morning asking me if I would like to be bumped off my flight, and they have to pay for that because every flight is full. And you see again and again, every time I'm at the top of this mountain, I just stare out and watch planes, private planes coming in. Apparently a private jet now in the US is rented for $20,000 an hour. Yeah. Oh, I know. It's a whole different standard of money. And I think that's a long conversation and one that I'd really like to have. But setting that aside, as a community here, of course, people work very much in tourism one way or another. Even in probably one of the 2 or 3 most famous bars in the United States is here. The Cowboy Bar and the $1 Million Cowboy Bar. Jackson's right up there with Aspen, Vail, those sort of places. And if you come back here in the wintertime, it is frozen over. Again, the higher elevation, lots of snow. So real year-round sort of destination. I expect they have a fairly long shoulder season, but I only ever come down here through the kind of higher season because, of course, that's when you're in Yellowstone as well, because some of the roads aren't open. So Yellowstone, straight north of us, if you take the quickest route, is about an hour, a little bit less to get into the base of the park. But Yellowstone, as I always insist, warrants at least 2 days. But I love these protected areas here. And this is arguably the largest protected preserve of temperate latitudes in the world. So if you are at all into birding, which I certainly am, you can just come and hang out here and see so much life. So, and you have to really give it to the foresight to protect this area back around the 1920s, because people wanted to develop it. Now, a lot of Wyoming is, of course, the least populated state in the United States. The capital, Cheyenne, is a long, long way southeast from down here. But, of course, there's just not a lot of population. It's good rangeland. But aside from that, there's some mining in certain corners of it. But it's not particularly productive soil. So it was never going to become, a hugely populated area. And, of course, back in those early days, you had the 2 Dakotas. This one's gorgeous right here. The 2 Dakotas and and Wyoming, all these territories. But say this is the one that had that early foresight to say everyone who's here has a right to a voice, and that's why suffrage was such a huge achievement. Look at that beautiful teepee over here. So lots of different Indigenous groups. The Blackfeet did make it all the way down here, but Shoshone tend to be the group that is most commonly referenced for the area down through the valley. And there's one of your antler arches there. We'll wander on up, but let me just show you. We're over by the visitor center right now. I might see if I can get permission sometime when I'm back down here to take everyone in for a walk. But they're into this bronze art all over the place. So there's the elk and a big bear. But I'll take you over. Sorry, the light is just a little hard. Let me just move around and we'll get a slightly different view. There you go. Nice big grizzly. I know it's a grizzly because of the hump on its back and the long claws on the paw. Is the general trick there. So let's go over and have a little peek here at Wyoming's wildlife. And those are Wyoming's outhouses as well. It's not worth a full tour. Here you go. So here's the Greater Yukon ecosystem. This one is referencing the 93%, which is public domain. And again, right around here, it's about 97%. So it's pretty spectacular. I know the light's just a little bit tough. There we go. It's but it is wonderful that these areas are protected. And it is an argument. There's one of the private jets flying in and out way up in the air there. It does mean we're taking off to the south, so I'm going to do everything in my power to sit on the right-hand side of the aircraft when I'm taking off. Some of you would see, that's true, wouldn't we? Some of you have seen the little shorts I've done on YouTube. Not that I'm wearing little shorts, but the little videos taking off. And it, of course, depends on the wind, but they all seem to be taking off to the south right now. So whenever I fly home, I fly from here over to Denver. And of course, Denver's fascinating from a structural point of view, because where we are right now is we're coming into the widest part of the North American Rockies. Now, the Canadian Rockies, of course, are a single formation. That's about 900 miles, 1,400 kilometers north-south. The American Rockies are a whole mix of things, and they've been affected so much by Yellowstone, by the supervolcano coming out, but also the fact that the Pacific plate, which is subducting, of course, some of the North American plate, has pushed back up. It's pushed back up from that Wind River Range right across to the Rocky Mountain National Park that's over by Denver. And that's why there's like 14 peaks, over 14,000 feet up in Colorado. But what's happened is that's really hard old rock has come up, and the younger stuff, the stuff that the Canadian Rockies are made of, for example, has all eroded away. So it's hard igneous rock. So even though, and I come back to this point, that up behind me, you have the Tetons, youngest range in the Rockies, 7 to 10 million years old, but the rock inside them, 2.5 billion years old in some cases, because it was way down at the lower part of the North American or Turtle Island plate, and that's what was pushed up. So we just have a block here that's not as interesting, and then we'll make our way right into the center of town. I was wearing this shirt yesterday afternoon, and two people came up to me and said, "Oh, where do I get one of those?" I'm like, "You got to go to La Paz in Bolivia." But of course, people here would know all about La Paz because this is such a climbing community. Pretty fantastic. So let me just switch you around here. So there's this one strip that comes in, and then it winds its way out on Broadway, out of town. Very, very simple town from a planning point of view. If you were to drive out south and west from here, you go down through a few other communities along the Snake River, just gorgeous, and then you move into Idaho. And so really the water from the Snake is used in agriculture in Idaho, which is, of course, famously known for potatoes. Then you go down a canyon, and that's where you drop down into the basin of the Great Salt Lake and Salt Lake City. So that drive I highly recommend. You come down into the town of Logan, or the city of Logan, which is really part of that chain. So you've got this one chain of really vigorous industry, which is, but really vigorous industry down there. But right down through Logan, Prevost, Ogden, Salt Lake City, all of that. And then, of course, you go up and over the mountain to the other side, which is where you find that full area, that 5 million plus people that live in the greater Denver area, which really includes Cheyenne, the capital of Wyoming. So here we go. So we're in the Bridger-Teton National Forest. There's also a Shoshone National Forest. Look at that, though, 3.4 million acres. How spectacular is that? And how important is that? So when we start to put it into a perspective, this is the map I wanted to show you earlier. So Jackson's right in here, right? So see all the great big protected areas, puts it, and then come right in. So this is where Jackson itself is not actually in park, but there's Grand Teton, and then that links up to this greater Yellowstone area, all up here. So Yellowstone itself is that top corner. In fact, when I'm doing Yellowstone, I usually stay in West Yellowstone, which is in Montana. So most of the population around Yellowstone's actually in Montana because the park sort of leaks out around the edges. The highest points, Yellowstone Lakeway up there, by the way, that flows north. That ends up in the Atlantic watershed. Whereas the south part, there's Shoshone and Lewis Lake. Lewis River comes down into Jackson Lake, and that ends up being the headwaters of the Snake, which is again the longest tributary of the Columbia River. And look at that. Leave no trace and control dogs. I'm a huge believer in both those things. Do you know, just since the time we've been walking along together, the sun's on me, and the temperature has probably gone up in Fahrenheit at least 10 degrees. And as once again, these are the kind of maps you can pick up. There's Grand Teton right there. And that Jackson Lake last year was almost drained out totally because of agriculture in, and it is dammed, agriculture in Idaho, but it's right back up because they had so much snow. The fire risk is nice and low at the moment here. And of course the fire risk at home, well, there it is, moderate. You can see it there. Give everyone a wave. Hi. All right, let's wander into town because this will be a little more familiar. Paws and hands, and there's tons of public art around here. Tons of it, which you would expect from a community like this. So this street does get a little noisy. So I do apologize in advance for the noise as we come through. But I really wanted to show those reflections in that marshland of the protected area because it is just so beautiful to see. So it's nice to have everyone here, just as we're wandering along this sort of block a little bit. Let you know I'm going to get home today. So this is obviously a Monday. I should have flown home yesterday, but I could have gotten a flight out, but it would have been $2,000. Like, that's how crazy. So the hotel put me up for an extra night. But I am going to be home for 10 whole days. Well, I don't get home until midnight. So this is the main street as we come in. And as you can see, it sort of conspires to being quite Western. And there are all those gentlemen working over there. Some Mexicanos. You have a large Mexican population here, but then you have so many of the temporary workers who come. And look at the license plates in Wyoming. You don't need a lot of digits on them because there's just not a lot of population and not a lot of people. But I only need to get up 2 streets, and then we're at the famous town square. So you don't get lost here too easily. You always have that ski hill Snow King in the back, which is the easy reference point for walking around. There's a statue to the early settlers. The other fun thing to see, I will, Karen, say hi. Maybe I'll put on a breakfast with Finn one day this week. For sure I will. I'll do something with Finn because I know everybody wants to see him. So they're in the corner, a little pink chairlift. They replaced the chairlift with a gondola, I guess last year before. And it doesn't really need a gondola, but it's really for sightseeing. So the valley is Jackson Hole, and the town is Jackson. So there you go. Things to see and do. They have loads of theater here as well. Again, because it's, of course, wealthy, there's a lot of demand for the arts as well. So this gives you a sense of where we are up in this northwest segment, probably an eighth of the whole state of Wyoming. So a nice big protected area. And I love the Centennial Scenic Byway. Now, this is very significant to the history of Wyoming because the early trails, after, of course, you had Lewis and Clark. Lynn, there is. Yeah, I was talking about it earlier. I'll walk you right up to the big cowboy bar. But you had, of course, Lewis and Clark came through. The Great Northern comes across, the Transcontinental Railway comes across the 1860s. Great Northern 20 years later. Of course, CPR further north was the 1880s. And then the early roads came right across here. There were trains that used to go up into Yellowstone. And in 1872, the government of the United States protected Yellowstone, the oldest, first national park in the modern world. So you really have to tip your hat at that. I'm just going to get past this gentleman here for a second and come show you this fabulous monument on the corner here. So, American Legion Post. Now, this town was pretty isolated in the early days. It's still an effort to get here, except the effort is more costs now. But there you go. So a troop of 26 Jackson volunteers enlisted in Cheyenne. So World War I. When they come back, and you suddenly have prohibition in the United States, there were no sheriffs here. That meant there was a lot of vigor and energy into the saloon scene out here, because when the sheriffs are coming all the way from Cheyenne in the early days, they knew they were coming because they were generally coming on horseback. And so then they could close down and hide all the booze. So the $1 Million Cowboy Bar was tied very much up into that period of prohibition. By the way, when I talk about being an arts community, and for those who missed the walk the other day, have a look at those mountain flowers there. And the beauty of it is just, well, in some ways almost unparalleled. And there's a herd of bison out in that picture with Grand Teton in the distance. Grand Teton is 13,775 feet high. And but the highest peaks are actually down in that Wind River range, which creates the Continental Divide. I think Grand Teton's the second or third highest in the state. Of course, for the really high mountains, you have to go up into Colorado. But in Colorado, you're so often in a plateau. So that makes a big difference. By the way, for those of you from the Episcopal background, there's the St. John's campus. And I've seen them actually do masses outside there on a Sunday, which is sort of fun. All right, so I'm sorry if you missed the beginning of our walk because you missed the beautiful reflections. Look at the old log cabin here. And what's really nice down through here is they have these plaques everywhere from their historic preservation. So this building's the 1930s. It's pretty young, but when you build a log cabin, you always have the cut facing down because the freeze and thaw, if it's facing up, will damage the cabin. And the old theater is now a pizza place. Lynn, do you have to cut and run? Sorry, when I'm walking, I'm not able to obviously see the chat as well, partly because here, I mean, this Facebook Live is working really well, but I only actually see one line at a time. But hopefully I'll work on it and do that better. And for those of you who wanted to see a moose, look at that gorgeous moose right there. There's the old 5 and 9 General Store. We're just coming up to the town square, but you will see up in the distance there. There's the cowboy, or the Bronco riding, and there is the $1 Million Cowboy Bar. Now, I went to bed at about 8:30 last night, and maybe 8:45, and I was out walking, and I could see people dressed up to go to the bar, but here is one of the antler arches. There it says Jackson Hole, Wyoming, right there. So these antler arches are great fun, and they've been here since 1960. Okay, let me get out of your way, folks. Yeah, you're welcome. There we are. So, because I will come over here. There's another one of the chairs from the ski hill. But when you're the National Elk Refuge, there's a lot of antlers out there. There's a guy up the road who does art with them. But there's the $1 Million Cowboy Bar. It's not actually that big, and there's no beer on tap. They give you cans or bottles. But that thing, they even have, of course, a store. That place is a license to print money. Here's John Coulter and Coulter Lake. So I will do I'm going to still consistently do a few tours a week. But I'm going on I'm going over to the UK. I fly the 27th. And I'm in London for a couple of days. And then I'm going to be on a cruise. And so I'm even going to be in Guernsey. So wait for a tour there. I've got 3 stops in Ireland. Now, I will be taking my group out on a bus and guiding. So, if I do a tour, it'll be very last minute. But then I'm going all the way up to Orkney, which I'm so excited about because I have never set foot on the Orkney Islands. But I was just listening to a talk saying there's still, I guess, a movement in Orkney to be part of Norway. So it's sort of interesting. So yeah, I will be doing, and I'll be doing the YouTube. I really do appreciate people signing on to our To Me Travel YouTube. There's a big raven up in the tree right there. I really do appreciate that. Subscribing, because it seems to be still, even though I'm using Facebook Live, it seems to be the best way forward. So I'm going to take you over now. Some of you will. Well, Barbara, I'm not disappearing. Like I say, I'll be doing tours of some, but yeah, and the YouTube as well. More and more, I want to be putting up, not super short ones, but kind of mid-length ones, just to have up every now and then. So I have shown you this artwork before, but it's pretty neat to see. Again, this bronze artwork is so popular in this area, and people actually buy these things. Yeah, look at that. I mean, they are the voyageurs, right? So that is some real French-Canadian tradition there, even though it was generally not owned by French Canadians, but they were the ones who worked out here to collect the hides of animals. Isn't that a fabulous scene, though? Obviously, they're rowing along with a moose. And then these two, I bet there's a lot we could tell of a story of the two people here helping each other up. And then, of course, there he is, Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain right there. One of those, of course, great writers and a complicated fellow. But make sure sometime in your life, go to Hartford, Connecticut and do the tour of his house there. That's where he wrote most of his famous books, and he is a fascinating character. He never really moved beyond his racism towards Indigenous people. He did move to opposing enslavement, which he had actually been a supporter of in the early days. So you can see that transition of his thinking at that time. And there's the ski hill. So where I saw all the flowers the other day was right at the top there. It took me about 46 minutes to walk up to the top there. And they do have a race every year from the town square. And I guess the fastest time is about 23 minutes, which is pretty cool. Now let me just go around one more. I've got one more mural to show everyone before we call it a day. In fact, the one thing I don't have when I do this is a clock. So I have no idea how long we've been visiting for at the moment. I expect 23 or 25 minutes or something. It's usually how long some of these go for. Now, these are ongoing war memorial, and whilst I have a huge amount of sympathy for people who have made these massive sacrifices, it's so nice to see other memorials as well. So we have 34. Oh, right, thanks. So stick with me for one more block, because I have a really, really cool mural to show everyone. And by the way, I do have lots of places I recommend for eating here, but there's a couple of pizzerias up in there which are about the cheapest places you can eat. I find I end up eating a lot of pizza when I'm here. This place is expensive. Yeah, they have a funny turning system, and there's obviously some real logic behind it. I have never come in, but here we are. There we go. So as we cross the street, let me just curve around here for a minute. So there's the antler arch behind me. But once again, you get up at the back of the mountains, and it's all just protected wilderness. And that's what's just so wonderfully appealing about these places. Do you really think? I wonder if Mick Jagger was here or not. They are, and just about a block that way, Karen, is a guy who actually just does work on it. I've seen him outside doing it. I'm into jaywalk, which is, mostly people just do that after they've been in the bar at night. But here we go. This is the Wyoming, and there is women in politics right there. Fortunately, the shadow doesn't help to all of our mountain towns are early that way. But there you go. Jackson elected one of the nation's early all-women town governments. Pretty fantastic. And then mountaineering out on the Tetons. That's pretty serious mountaineering. But that's still not the mural I'm here to show you yet. I've got one more I need to come and show everyone. So just come up around the corner here, and I think you'll be able to bear it. We'll see at all the gorgeous flowers. Pearl Street, if I turn right, I walk about 4 blocks down to my hotel. But here we are. We are very much in wilderness country and bear country, so be alert, be aware, carry bear spray, keep your distance, make noise, do not feed, store all food, travel in groups. So that is just good advice. It's just fun to see these down through here. More murals in the back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, listen. Thanks for joining me. I will be going flying over to Denver um, sometime around 2 o'clock, 1:30. I say that because they may have bumped me onto an hour later, but it doesn't matter. I have 4 hours in Denver, so I don't mind being bumped for an hour. And then I get home. Thank you. And then I wait as long as I have to land by 10 o'clock because the last shuttle back to Banff is at 10:30. So, and last time I missed it. But, we should be on time. I should land at 9:30. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.